Hi, I am Ankita. Today I will explain authentication and authorization task. The code imports necessary namespaces from .NET libraries. Class declaration. The basic authentication handler class inherits from authentication handler, which is the base class for handling authentication in ASP.NET Core. Constructor. The constructor initializes the authentication handler by accepting various dependencies such as options, logger, encoder and clock. It also initializes a password hasher instance. Handler authenticate async method. This method is responsible for handling the authentication logic. Here is an overview of what it does. Retrieves the authentication header from the HTTP request, checks if the authorization header is present and starts with basic. Extracts and decodes the base64 encoded credentials from the authorization header. Parses the credentials, that is email and password, from the decoded string. Retrieves the user from the database based on the provided email. Verifies the user's password using a password hasher instance. If the user is authenticated successfully, it constructs claim about the user such as name and role. Constructs the claims identity and claims principal based on the claims. Issues an authentication ticket with the authenticated principal. Returns authenticate results success if authentication is successful, otherwise returns it fails. Exception catching. It catches any exceptions that occur during the authentication process, logs them, and returns an authentication failure result with an appropriate error message. Next, maps controller.cs. The API controller attribute is used to indicate that this is a class is an API controller. It enables some features such as automatic model validation and response formatting. Route attribute. The route attribute is used to specify the base route for all endpoints with this controller. In this case, the base route is API/maps. Action methods. Get all maps. HTTP get endpoint to retrieve all maps. It calls map data access.get maps to fetch all maps from the data source. Get square maps. HTTP get endpoint to return maps where the number of rows equal the number of columns. It is also decorated with the authorized attribute specifying that only authenticated users with the user-only policy can access the endpoint. Get map by ID. This endpoint to retrieve a map by its ID. It calls mapDataAccess.getMapById and returns the map if found, or a 404 not found response otherwise. Add map. HTTP post endpoint to add a new map. It receives a map object in the request body, validates it, and then add it using mapDataAccess.addMap. Update map. HTTP put endpoint to update an existing map. It retrieves the map by its ID, update its properties, and then calls mapDataAccess update map to persist the changes. HTTP delete endpoint to delete a map by its ID. It checks if the map exists, delete it using this method, and return 204 no content response upon successful deletion. Check coordinates. HTTP get endpoint to check a coordinate is within a map. It receives map ID, x coordinate and y coordinate as parameters, validates the coordinates, retrieves the map by ID, and then calls mapDataAccess.check coordinates ID in x and y coordinate to perform the check. Authorization. The authorized attribute is used to specify access control policies for certain endpoints. It ensures that only authenticated users with specific roles or claims can access those endpoints. Now, robot commands controller.cs. Again, this is the route attribute, specifies the base route for all endpoints, and here is the API/robot commands. Action methods. Get all robot commands to fetch all commands from the data source. Get move commands only. It is also decorated with authorized attribute restricting access to authenticated users with the user only policy. Get command by ID. To retrieve a robot command by its ID, it calls this method and returns the command if found or a 404 not found response otherwise. Add robot command to add a new robot command and it retrieves a robot command object in the request body. Update robot command to update an existing robot command. It retrieves the command by its ID. Access to this endpoint is restricted to users with the admin only policy. Delete robot command to delete a robot command by its ID. Authorization. The authorized attribute is used to specify access control policies for certain endpoints. User controller. Again, same things are here, but in action methods. Get users. To retrieve all users. Get user by ID. It searches for the user by ID in the list of all users retrieved from the data source. If the user is found, it returns an OK response with the user data. Otherwise, it returns a 404 not found responses. Add user. To add a new user, it receives a user model object in the request body, hashes the password using password hasher, sets creation and modification dates, inserts the user into the data source, and returns a 201 created response with the newly created user data. Update user. To update an existing user, and it verifies that the ID in the request matches the ID in the user object, updates the user in the data source, and returns a 204 no content resource. Authorization, again used to specify access control policies. Password hashing. When adding a new user, that is add user method, the password is hashed using password hasher before storing it in the database. This ensures that passwords are securely stored. Now, map data access, class and constants. The map data access class contains methods for accessing map related data in the database. It includes a constant connection string which holds the connection string to the PostgreSQL database. Method overview. Get maps. Retrieve all maps from the database by executing a SQL select query. Get square maps. Retrieve a map is square is true from the database. Add map to add a new map. Update map to updates an existing map in the database. Check coordinate. Check if a given coordinate is within the boundary of map specified by its ID. Database interaction. Each method opens a database connection using npg SQL connection and executes SQL commands using npg SQL command. For parameterized queries, it uses npg SQL command parameters.add with value to avoid SQL injection vulnerabilities. Error handling for database operation is not explicitly implemented in this code. In a production environment, it's essential to handle exceptions and potential errors gracefully. Date time usage. Date time now is used to set created date and modify date fields when adding or updating a map. It's important to note that this captures the server's local time. Depending on the application's requirements, storing timestamp in UTC may be preferred for consistency and handling time zone differences. Robot command data access. Method overview. Retrieve all robot commands from the database by executing a SQL select query. Get move commands only. Get command by ID. Update robot command. Delete robot command. Database interaction. Opens a database connection using npg SQL connection and executes SQL commands using this command. For parameterized queries, it uses npg SQL commands. Error handling, data time usage. User data access. Here is the method get all users. Retrieve all user from the database. Get user by email. Retrieves the user by their email address from the database. Update user to update an existing user in the database. Insert user to insert a new user into the database. Delete user to delete a user by their ID. And this is the for parameterized queries. Date, time, usage, that is used to set created date and modify date. This is the login model.cs. Namespace named robot controller API. Public class named login model. And there are email and password are both type of string. Get set method. Login model. Here are two parameters, email and password, that are initialized to this. Map.cs named robot controller API. Public class map. Here are fields, ID, columns, rows, name, description, created date, modified date. And this is the matlab description can be null. And here are parameters that are initialized to ID, columns, rows, name. Now program.cs. These lines import necessary namespaces for working with authentication claims and cookies in ASP.NET Core. And this is the line, that means this line creates a new instance of web application builder using the create builder method, which is used to configure and build the web application. Service configuration. These lines add necessary services to the dependency injection container. Add controllers, add services for controllers. Authentication configuration. This line configures authentication services for the application. It specifies the authentication scheme as basic authentication and registers the basic authentication handler to handle authentication requests. And all these configure authorization policies for the application. Two policies are defined, admin only and user only. That requires user to have admin role claim, while user only policies require users to have their admin or user role claims. App.use authentication authorization HTTP redirection. These line register middleware components in the ASP.NET Core request pipeline. Use authentication and authorization middleware enable authentication and authorization respectively. And this is request to HTTPS. This starts the application listening for incoming HTTP request. Robot command.cs, again public robot command, and there are some ID, name, is move command, created date is type of date time, modified date is type of date time, description can be null. And this is the user model in public class. Here are included first name and last name, password hash also. Now we can see output. If I put .NET run, here we can enter username, that is ankitabansal.com, and that is the password, and you can see this result with 200 OK response. And if we change like this, and it will show status 401 with unauthorized. Get all users by ID, and we can change here 13, and this is the result. This is the email and password with the authorization, and this is the body code. There are lot of IDs with 200 OK response. We can change 20, and this is the status 404 not found. If we change 17, then this is the result. Now we are moving on post request. If we change ID number 45 to 20, then it will be result. In delete request, this is the deleted ID, and if I am changed 15 to 20, deleted command successfully. Get all maps. Get map by ID. Let us take 6. 404 not found. With 5, this. And in post maps, map added successfully, and if I changed 12 to 10, then it also shows 200 status code left to right, map added successfully. Let us take 6, deleted map successfully. Post add user like ishan.com. Let us take password Ishani. First name is Isha. Last name is Garg. And you can see the result here with 201 created. Delete user. If I replace 14 to 10, then it will show 404 not found. With 14 also. And with 17 also. Patch. User credentials updated successfully. And you can see this is the status code with 10. Thank you for watching my video. If you have any query, then you can text.